Hello there. This short video today is going to go over solving quadratic equations. We're going to learn how to solve quadratics by the graphing method and by using square roots. So let's talk about first solve by graphing. So when you graph the quadratic, the x-intercept of the graph are what we call the roots. The roots of the function are the solutions. So basically what I'm saying is where that graph crosses that x-axis, every place it touches that x-intercept, those are the solutions to your quadratic. So look at our first graph. It says y equals x squared minus 4x plus 3. When we graph it, you can see the graph is touching right here at x equals 1. And here at x equals 3. So this graph has two solutions, and its two solutions would be x equals, that's a terrible x there, x equals 1, and at x equals 3. The middle graph here, y equals x squared minus 4x plus 4, this is touching my x-intercept once. At that point, x equals 2. So this only has one solution, and its solution is at x equals 2. My last graph here, y equals x squared minus 4x plus 6, notice it is not touching my x-axis. Here's my x-axis. There are no x-intercepts. So this graph has no solutions. There are no answers that would make x squared minus 4x plus 6 true. So there are three types of answers we can get here. We can get two solutions, one solution, or a no solution graph when graphing quadratic equations. So what are the steps for when we solve these ourselves? So the nice thing about quadratics is we are able to use our Desmos calculator. The very first thing, though, you want to make sure before you put it into your Desmos calculator is make sure that your equation is set equal to 0. If it's not set equal to 0, rearrange it so it does equal 0. You then can put it into your Desmos calculator, and then from there you can determine those x-intercepts. So let's go ahead. I don't think I have. Let's see. Nope. I don't have Desmos open, so let's open it real quick. Let's graph a few examples. All right, here. So x squared minus 16. So right here, I can see, okay, my quadratic is graphed. I have two solutions, and those two solutions are at x equals negative 4. And when x equals 4. Let's try my next one. Let's try 2x squared minus 4x. Again, two solutions at 2 and 0. Remember, you can click on that graph and it tells you what those solutions are. Let's see if we can get one with, let's see, negative 2x squared plus x minus 1. Notice this one does not cross that x-axis, so this one has no solutions. It is not crossing that x-intercept. And look at number 4. X squared plus 8 equals 8. You notice it is not meeting step 1. It does not equal 0. So let's go ahead and let's subtract 8 from both sides to get it equal to 0. Remember, this is just like when you did solving equations. To move it from one side of the equal to the other side of the equal, you always do the opposite sign or the opposite operation. So here we go. X squared plus 8 minus 8. Let's see, those cancel out. So I'm just left with x squared equals 0. And you should know that is the parent function of a quadratic. Oops. So if I graph x squared, I have one solution at the point 0, 0. So again, when graphing, just plug them into your Desmos calculator, determine where it crosses those x-axes. Now let's talk about when we're solving using square roots. If you have an equation, you can sometimes use square roots. There are cases where you can't. That one case would be if you are taking the square root of a negative number. Remember, you can't take the square root of a negative number. So again, our solutions, there's three types of solutions we can get. There we go. We can get two solutions where we have two answers. We can get one solution, or we can go ahead and get no solution. So same as graphing, there's three types of solutions we can get. When we are solving, we're going to isolate the squared term on one side of the equation. So we're going to get that x squared term all by itself. So if you look at case number 1, it says x squared equals 9. That x squared is all by itself. Now the opposite of squaring is a square root. So we're going to square root both sides. When we square root, the squared and the square root, those cancel each other out. They're opposites. So they cancel each other out. When we take the square root, you can have a positive or negative solution. The reason is if you have, so I'm going to do like a little side note over here in this upper corner. So side note, 3 squared and a negative 3 squared, they both equal 9. 3 times 3 is 9. Negative 3 times negative 3, well, negative times a negative is positive. So that equals 9. So when you take the square root, remember, it's plus or minus that number. X squared equals 0. The x squared is by itself. Go ahead, take the square root. The square root of 0 is just 0. 0 isn't positive or negative, so there's just one solution where x equals 0. Last one, x squared equals negative 9. When you square root, you can't take the square root of a negative number. So again, that one's no solution. So let's kind of do a few examples here. 2x squared minus 32 equals 0. So this is a case where we need to get the x squared by itself. Think of it again as like you're solving the equation. So when you're solving the equation, you first have to move to the other side what is not with your variable. So let's go ahead, let's add 32 to both sides. So it's being subtracted. Remember, we do the opposite operation. So we're going to add 32 to both sides. When we do that, we get 2x squared equals 32. That x squared is not by itself again. So let's go ahead. One more step. The 2 is being multiplied. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So let's divide both sides by 2. We now are left with x squared equals 16. I now am ready to go ahead and use the square root. X squared equals 16. If I square root both sides, my square root and my squared cancel each other out. So I'm left with x equals, well, the square root of 16 is 4, but remember, it's plus or minus. So I'm going to put plus or minus 4. Or I could write it x equals 4. And x equals negative 4, either way. Here's the thing, guys. Remember, let's say square root, you're looking at this and you're like, oh, I'm not sure I remember how to do that. That's okay. Let's check ourselves. We can use the Desmos. Move this over a little bit so we can see it. So let's just check to make sure we did that correctly. So put the original back in our Desmos, 2x squared minus 32. The equation was equal to 0, so we could put it in Desmos as it is. And look, check ourselves. We get our answers a negative 4 and 4. So always use that Desmos calculator to check yourselves. Or if the problem doesn't specifically said, hey, let's solve it by square roots, go ahead and just graph it. Let's try one more. 3x squared plus 15 equals 0. Let's first move that 15. It's being added, so let's subtract it. So we're going to subtract 15 from both sides. We're then left with 3x squared equals a negative 15. Right away, you should already notice something, but let's go ahead, let's continue. The 3 is being multiplied by that x squared. Let's go ahead and divide. I'm then left with x squared equals negative 5. Negative 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. X squared equals negative 5. I would then go ahead and take the square root of both sides. But you should notice, I can't take the square root of a negative number. I can't take the square root of -5. This should be a no solution. Again, let's double check. Let's use Desmos. And let's just verify. So let's see, 3x squared plus 15. Yep. My graph does not cross. Oops. Helps if I have the right equation. There we go. My quadratic does not cross that x-axis. So I am correct in saying it has no solutions. All right, let's discuss one last one. A real-world example here. So a zoo is including a new aquarium in its quadratic exhibit. The tank will be a rectangular prism with a length L that is twice its width. The volume of the tank is 420 feet cubed, and the height is 4 feet. What is the width of the tank? So a few things here we have to remember. First off, how do we find the volume of a rectangular prism? Well, that would be length times width times height. And it tells me here that I know my V is going to equal 420. So the tank here, the volume it says is 420. My height is 4. I'm looking for W, so I don't know what W is. W is going to be my X in this case. My length, it tells me the length is twice its width. So my length is going to be 2 times my W. Let's go ahead, let's evaluate, or let's plug those into the equation. So my equation here would be 420 equals length times width times height. So 2W times my width, W, times my height of 4. We can then simplify 2W times 4. Well, W times a W is W squared, and 2 times 4 is 8. So this gives me 8W squared. And I'm still left with 420 on my left here. Now I could solve it either by graphing or by using the square root. Let's try the square root. So let's go ahead, let's divide both sides by 8. Let's divide both sides by 8. So let's see, W squared. So 420 divided by 8. Oh, that doesn't come out even. So that's probably not the way I want to do it, but let's just keep continue. 42.5. And then lastly, we would square root both sides. So this is one where it's not going to come out even. Now, remember, this was a real world example. I can't have a negative W. So my final answer would just be the square root of 52.5. Let's go ahead though. Let's use our calculator, and let's maybe graphing it was a better choice. So let's see. It would be 8x squared minus 420. Remember, I put minus 420 because I have to get my equation equal to 0. So I just move that 420 to the other side. And let's see. So my answer here would be 7.246. I'm going to check myself. Let's see what the square root of 52.5 is. It should be the same. Yep, it is the same. So either way, we would have got the correct answer. So the width of our tank here is approximately 7.25 feet. If you have questions, you need more practice, please don't hesitate to reach out to your teacher. Have a wonderful afternoon.